And what they danced and sang was all they knew. It was all they needed to know, and it was all they would ever need to know. And after the war, people are running away to the suburbs and running so hard they're forgetting all kinds of stuff about who we are. And the people in the cities get lost too. People were trying to bring America's arts to the schools. And here's Duke Ellington at Ohio State University. His tenor sax man, Big Al Sears, befriends a student trombonist named Alan Freed, and they keep in touch. Freed goes into radio and has a show in Cleveland called The Moondog Show. Big Al writes a song called Castle Rock. Big Al goes on Freed's show, and Freed plays this song 7 times and starts calling these blues shuffles rock and roll. It wasn't nothing but what Basie had been playing and Louis Jordan played and Fats Domino and them down in New Orleans. Pretty soon, Freed started producing rock and roll shows with integrated bands. Of course, he had Big Al in one of those bands. American Bandstand approaches Freed with a television spot and says, "We want you on TV, but you got to lose those colored boys." Freed says, "Wait a second, man, Big Al has been with me since I was in college. I can't fire these men." So they said, "Too bad." They hired Dick Clark and did away with the band altogether to avoid unpleasantry. That's marketing. Anyway, black folks had Soul Train on TV. And funk was the rage, and no one remembered that rock and roll was a merger of gospel, country, and the blues played by musicians influenced by jazz. No one remembered Al Freed or Big Al Sears. No one remembered that Louis Armstrong had played with Jimmy Rogers on Blue Yodel #9, and that country, R&B, and pop charts, these charts all had the same #1 song in 1955, Cal Perkins's Blue Suede Shoes. No one remembers that a 2-beat groove is the same in all forms of American music. So is the blues. They only remembered slavery and segregation, and they put Chuck Berry in jail for the wrong kind of integrating. And rock took on a distinctively different face, only to have musicians from Britain come in the 1960s to reintroduce us to our own pre-segregated rock and roll. It was called the British Invasion. Boy, that's something, ain't it? Our own tradition coming back to us as an echo of the blues, draped in sexuality without the blackface. Nobody remembered that the American arts were integrated before baseball. But by the time the dust of the rock revolution had cleared some kind of way, rock ended up being white and the definitive national music. And the blacks ended up with the minstrel show again. But it's okay. This new minstrelsy was complex too, as suburban whites imitate the inner city blacks who embrace the bourgeois disaffection expressed in heavy metal nihilism, fueled by the white misconception that black people are freer with their emotions and sexuality. Mind the music and the dance. No one remembers how hard fought the integration of our arts was, and few cared to remember what any of the dances mean. And the country was in peril. The stock market crashed because of greed. And all over the country, people argued about life and love and loss and freedom and God and who they were and who they wanted to be and who they wanted their kids to be. And some people took their own lives, while some people became more alive. It was at our lowest point that we reached for who we were instead of what we were. And the classic dimensions of the American experience as expressed in art flourished. George Gershwin, Jerome Kern, they just kept on writing shows. And those songs spoke to the aspirations of millions of immigrants who came to this country wanting to participate in the American experience. Here's Cole Porter and Irving Berlin, and Richard Rodgers and Johnny Mercer to tell them who we are with an enduring body of American popular song that still speaks to matters of the human heart and every type of human circumstance. And we made films that defined the genre, and we listened to bands swing all over this country on radios, and we danced. Dizzy Gillespie said dancing never made nobody cry. You don't like what I'm saying? Don't come back, man. Chris Crenshaw. We danced all over this land to the living room radio And then we began to fill ballrooms. And what glorious music. In the nation's most trying economic times, we swang. This was our thing, and we knew how to do it. It was the two-beat foxtrot of high society. It was the four-on-the-floor jump of Kansas City swing. The sophistication of Eastern Seaboard piano and an instrumental virtuosity that came straight from Sousa and those men who sang through their horns in the South, inspired by Buddy Bolden. The sweet ballads of singers like Billie Holiday, Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, fronting impeccably clad jazz orchestras. The call and response of brass and woodwind that echoed democratic discourse from as far back as the Constitution, and Latin rhythms that put another accent on the beat. Intricate orchestrations that defied the norms of instrumentation. Ellington, the Dorsey brothers, Glenn Miller, they burned up miles and miles of highway, bringing their brand of freedom to a populace in search of true meaning. And Benny Goodman and his orchestra go on tour with a library full of songs arranged by New York band leader Fletcher Henderson, who was 6 when his father was freed by General Sherman. And the band goes west. Fewer and fewer people turn out. And Benny begins to replace the Henderson arrangements with corny stock arrangements. Finally, the band reaches Los Angeles, damn near broke and demoralized. They're booked for 3 whole weeks at the Palomar Ballroom in Los Angeles, and to their surprise, the room is packed. They pull out those corny stock arrangements. In the first set, 4,000 couples are bored to death. Drummer Gene Krupa convinces Benny, say, hey man, we at least should go out swinging. We have to have some level of integrity. Benny says, okay, we broke. What difference is it going to make? They break out those Henderson charts, and that night, 8,000 people in the heart of the Depression lost their mind, renewed their souls, and danced their feet off, launching the swing era. What they heard was Afro-American. It was Jewish. It was Creole. It was the blues. It was improvised. It was syncopated. It was jazz. It was the sound of freedom. And I'm telling you that what they played and the way they played it was all you knew. It was all you needed to know. And it was all you would ever need to know. It was all American. In the 1980s, I presented an award to Dizzy Gillespie. And Benny Goodman was presenting Martin Gould with the same award. When I met Benny Goodman, there was absolutely no feeling of any mutual experience between the two of us. I knew his name. I had heard a few of his recordings, but I didn't know who he was. With all my education, I was the perfect product of a disrespectful American youth culture, a school system segregated by information, and a decade of retrenching under the mind-numbing philosophies of black nationalism and good old boy Southern exclusion. I could only respond with distaste at the fact that he was called the King of Swing. I knew nothing of his pioneering integration of American art. I didn't understand that I was part of his legacy. Coming from New Orleans, I knew I was part of Louis Armstrong's legacy, still no real understanding of who the man was, what he meant to the world, what his achievements were. After all, it was old. I didn't understand what it took for Winslow Homer to paint black people with dignity in the 19th century. I'd never heard of him. And I definitely didn't understand why any of this could be important to me. It's old stuff. The funny part of it was that I was a star product of the education system. My father's a teacher and a musician. I always made good grades in school, had great teachers. I was still completely ignorant to the riches of my artistic heritage as an American. We all were. I didn't understand how hard fought the victories of American culture were. The best of the American arts and the way they've been sung and swung provided human meaning to the questions posed by the founding fathers more than 150 years earlier.